The piano room had a quiet sound that day, the kind that came from old walls and years of soft music. Sunlight fell through the tall window and rested on the piano keys, making them look tired but familiar. The piano teacher sat alone on the small wooden bench, her hands resting in her lap. She had taught in this room for more years than she could remember. Soon she would not sit here anymore. Retirement was close, and the thought felt heavy and strange. She looked around the room slowly. The shelves were full of worn music books, their corners bent and pages yellow. Some books still had notes written in pencil, reminders from lessons long past. A clock on the wall ticked softly, counting moments she could never get back. She had listened to that sound for decades. It had been there for first lessons, last lessons, and every mistake in between. Many students had passed through this room. Some came with big dreams and loud voices. Others came because their parents pushed them. Some stayed only a few weeks while others stayed for years. She remembered faces better than names. The way a student leaned forward when nervous. The way another smiled when a song finally sounded right. These small things stayed with her. As retirement grew closer, people often asked how she felt. She always smiled and said she was ready to rest. That was partly true. Her hands were slower now, and her back hurt after long hours. Still, letting go of this room felt like leaving a part of herself behind. Teaching was not just her job. It was her life. She stood up and walked toward the piano. Her fingers hovered above the keys, then pressed down gently. A simple melody filled the room, soft and careful. It was a song she often used for beginners, one she had played hundreds of times. Even now, the sound felt warm. Music had a way of holding memories without words. While playing, her thoughts drifted to her current students. Most had already said their goodbyes. Some brought flowers. Some brought cards with kind messages. A few cried. She listened and thanked them all. Still, there was one student she had not heard from much. The quietest one. This student never spoke unless spoken to. During lessons, there were no questions, no complaints. Just careful listening and slow movement across the keys. When mistakes happened, the student did not laugh or sigh. They simply tried again. Sometimes the teacher wondered what was going on inside that silent mind. From the very first lesson, the student had been different. While others fidgeted or looked around the room, this one sat still. Eyes stayed on the keys, shoulders tight, breath shallow. The teacher had learned long ago that quiet did not always mean calm. Often it meant fear. She remembered that first day clearly. The student walked in with small steps, holding a music book close to their chest. When she asked a simple question, the student nodded instead of speaking. She smiled gently and did not push. Over time, she learned that patience was louder than words. Weeks turned into months. Progress was slow, but steady. Some days were better than others. On difficult days, the student's hands shook, and notes came out wrong. The teacher never raised her voice. She pointed things out softly, showing again and again. She knew some students needed time more than talent. Other students sometimes teased the quiet one. Not cruelly, but enough to hurt. They joked about how little was said, how stiff the playing looked. The teacher stopped that behavior when she noticed it. She reminded them that everyone learns differently. After that, she paid closer attention. As the years passed, the student remained. Others came and left, but this one stayed. The music grew stronger even if the voice did not. The teacher noticed small changes. The hands became steadier. The pauses between notes became smoother. Confidence showed itself in sound, even when words were missing. Now, with retirement close, the teacher wondered if the student even knew how much time had passed. Some people did not notice endings until they arrived. She worried that the final lesson would come and go quietly, like so many others. That morning, she checked her schedule. Only a few lessons remained. One of them belonged to the quiet student. She felt a mix of relief and sadness. Relief that she would see the student one last time. Sadness that she might never know what the lessons truly meant to them. She straightened the chairs and wiped the piano keys with a soft cloth. Every small action felt important. She wanted the room to look the way it always had. Familiar. Safe. This place had been a second home for many children who felt lost elsewhere. As the clock moved closer to the next lesson, she listened for footsteps in the hallway. Each sound made her heart lift slightly, then settle again. She reminded herself not to expect anything special. Most goodbyes were simple. Still, something about this one felt unfinished. She sat back down at the piano and played the beginner song again. Slower this time. The notes filled the room, wrapping around her like a memory. She did not know yet that this quiet student would soon leave something behind that would stay with her long after the music stopped. For now, the room waited. The piano waited. And the teacher waited, unaware that the simplest moments often carry the deepest meaning. The quiet student waited outside the piano room, hands tucked into the pockets of a worn jacket. The hallway smelled faintly of dust and polish, the same as it had for years. The student hesitated, glancing at the door, unsure if it was right to enter first. Time and experience had taught the student many lessons, but courage in small, important moments still felt like a challenge. Inside, the piano teacher arranged her sheet music carefully. Her movements were calm, almost ritualistic. She knew this would be another lesson like so many before, but also different. There was a sense that something unspoken had been growing between her and the quiet student. Perhaps it was understanding. Perhaps it was trust. Whatever it was, it made her heart warm and ache at the same time. When the door opened, the student stepped in slowly. The sound of footsteps on the wooden floor echoed slightly in the room. The student's eyes darted toward the piano, then the shelves of books, as if remembering every detail that had been observed in years of lessons. The teacher looked up, smiled softly, and gestured toward the piano bench. No words were exchanged at first. Words had never been necessary in their lessons. Instead, they communicated through music. The student sat down, fingers hovering over the keys, waiting for the signal to begin. The teacher watched quietly, noticing the small adjustments in posture, the way the shoulders relaxed slightly as the hands hovered. The first notes were careful, measured. The melody was simple, but each note carried weight. The teacher did not interrupt. She had learned that the student thrived when given space, when mistakes were met with patience rather than correction. Listening closely, she felt the subtle growth in each phrase. Confidence was not loud. It was quiet and deliberate, emerging slowly like dawn. As the lesson continued, small challenges were presented. The teacher introduced a new section, slightly faster than before. The student's fingers stumbled, hesitation clear in the pauses. Yet, instead of frustration, the teacher's face remained calm. She gently guided the hands, showing, demonstrating, then stepping back. The student repeated the notes, a little stronger each time. The teacher felt a quiet satisfaction. This was progress, steady and real. During a short pause, the student looked up at the teacher for the first time that morning. The eyes were filled with a mix of anxiety and curiosity. The teacher nodded, offering a reassuring smile. No words were needed. She knew that the student was thinking about the difficulty, about whether they could manage it. She knew the student had often doubted themselves, even outside the classroom. The quiet student had always been different from the others. Where other students liked applause, attention, or recognition, this one seemed content to learn in silence. The teacher often wondered if the student realized how remarkable that was. Perseverance without need for praise, commitment without show. It was rare. She admired it silently, never saying so aloud. Months had passed since the beginning of their lessons, yet the student had made noticeable changes. Hands no longer trembled as much. Notes were cleaner, phrases smoother. There was still work to do, but the foundation had grown strong. The student moved through the music with care, each mistake met with determination rather than despair. The teacher could see growth not just in music, but in character. Other students often didn't understand. They could not see the effort behind the quiet exterior. They were loud, eager, and impatient. Sometimes they asked why the quiet student spent so long on a simple piece. The teacher explained gently, never dismissing their curiosity, but always defending the value of persistence and patience. Learning was not a race. Music was not just sound. It was feeling, understanding, and patience. After the lesson, the teacher sat back and watched the student pack up the music book. The hands, so careful in movement, now handled belongings with the same gentleness. The student hesitated at the door, looking back once, then left without a word. The teacher remained, thinking of all the small, quiet moments that had accumulated over years of teaching. Outside, the student walked slowly down the hall, replaying the lesson in the mind. Every mistake, every correction, every small success. There was pride, though it was quiet, subtle, almost hidden. The student was used to blending into the background, to being overlooked. But each lesson carried a private victory, one known only to the student and the teacher. Some days, the student stayed late after lessons, playing for hours when no one was around. The teacher knew, sometimes pausing at the door to listen from the hallway. The music became stronger, more confident, yet it never lost its careful, patient quality. The student was learning not only music but also a lesson in resilience and self-trust. The teacher often reflected on the importance of quiet students. Loud ones were easy to notice, easy to celebrate. Quiet ones required attention, patience, and understanding. They revealed themselves slowly, layer by layer. And when they finally did, the teacher realized that they often carried more depth than anyone else had imagined. As the end of the lesson approached, the teacher prepared a small encouragement. Not words, but a look, a nod, a gesture toward the music. The student responded with a subtle smile, barely visible, but the teacher felt it fully. This silent exchange was worth more than applause or recognition. It was trust, understanding, and growth, all communicated without sound. After the student left, the teacher stayed in the room, thinking about the journey. Every quiet student had left a mark in her heart, but this one felt special. There was a connection that words could never describe, a bond formed entirely through patience, music, and shared effort. She realized that the quietest students often teach the deepest lessons, showing her the value of persistence, humility, and care. The day ended, sunlight fading through the window, leaving long shadows across the piano keys. The room felt both empty and full, holding all the memories of lessons past and the quiet hope of lessons to come. The teacher knew that soon, retirement would close this chapter, but the impact of the quiet student, and all those like them, would remain forever. The quiet student, walking home, carried the melody of the lesson in the mind. It was not just notes but a sense of achievement, of growth, of something hard-earned. Words might be few, but understanding was deep. Each step home felt lighter than the first, filled with the promise that each quiet effort mattered. In the heart, the music continued, slowly building strength, ready to carry the student into future challenges with courage and care. The day of the final lessons arrived. The school corridors were busy with students finishing their activities, carrying books and backpacks, chatting about plans for the weekend. Yet inside the piano room, the atmosphere was quiet, almost solemn. The teacher arranged the music sheets carefully and wiped the keys once more, though they were already clean. It felt like a ritual, preparing the space for one last performance of years of dedication and care. One by one, former students arrived. Some brought flowers, others small notes or cards. Their smiles were bright, but there was a hint of sadness in their eyes. They spoke in happy voices, telling stories of how much they had learned, how the lessons had shaped them. The teacher listened, her heart swelling with pride, but also with the ache of knowing this chapter was coming to an end. Most of the students had left after a few minutes, hugging the teacher and exchanging farewells. The room slowly emptied, leaving behind only the faint scent of polish and the soft echo of piano notes that had filled it for so many years. The teacher looked around, a small smile touching her lips. Then she heard the soft click of the door opening. The quiet student stepped in. Unlike the others, there was no chatter, no gifts, no excitement. Only the careful steps of someone who had always moved through life quietly, yet thoughtfully. The student stopped at the door, glancing around the room. The teacher's eyes met theirs, and she offered the gentle nod she had given for years, inviting the student to sit at the piano. This final lesson was different. The student knew it was the last one. The teacher felt the weight of it too. There was no need for words at first. Both understood that the music itself would carry the farewell. The student placed hands on the keys, fingers hovering for a long moment before pressing down to play a simple melody. It was the same one they had started with all those years ago, but now it sounded stronger, more confident, filled with the growth that had happened quietly over time. The teacher listened, noticing each note, each pause, each small triumph in the playing. Mistakes were fewer, confidence was steadier, and even the quiet pauses between phrases seemed filled with meaning. There was a story in the music, one that could not be told with words. She could feel it in her heart, the culmination of patience, guidance, and the quiet determination of the student. As the melody ended, the student looked up briefly. Eyes met eyes, sharing something words could not capture. The teacher nodded, a smile forming on her lips, feeling pride and a sense of completion. There was a connection built over years, small moments stacked upon each other, now revealed in a simple song. The teacher gestured toward a new piece, slightly more complex, something the student had struggled with before. There was no pressure, only encouragement. The student took a deep breath and began to play. Fingers moved carefully, notes ringing clearly, mistakes handled with calm corrections. The teacher guided when necessary but mostly watched, allowing the student to shine. There was a beauty in watching someone grow silently, to see their confidence emerge without loud declarations. For a moment, the room felt timeless. Outside, the sounds of the world continued, but inside, only music and understanding existed. The student played through the piece, expression and precision blending in perfect harmony. The teacher felt tears welling but kept them back. She had cried before when saying goodbye to students, but this moment was different. There was no need for tears. The music itself was enough. When the lesson finally ended, the student stayed seated for a moment, hands resting lightly on the keys. The teacher approached and gently placed a hand on the student's shoulder. No words were exchanged, but the gesture carried warmth, approval, and deep affection. The student nodded slightly, a quiet acknowledgement of the bond they shared. The student rose slowly and walked toward the door, pausing for just a moment to look back. The teacher watched silently, noticing the small changes that had happened over years. This student had come into the room timid and unsure, carrying doubts and quiet fear. Now, they walked with quiet strength, self-assuredness born from perseverance and care. As the student left, the teacher remained at the piano, feeling the emptiness settle in. The echoes of music lingered, but the room felt different. It was the end of a chapter, the closing of a door that had been open for decades. She took a deep breath, running her hands over the keys one last time, remembering every student, every lesson, every small victory. After a while, she began putting the sheets and books away, carefully arranging the room as she always had. Each movement was slow, deliberate, a farewell in itself. The teacher knew that this quiet student had left a mark unlike any other. Not through words or gestures, but through silent trust, steady growth, and an understanding that required no explanation. The day passed, sunlight fading, leaving shadows on the piano and shelves. The teacher sat down briefly, reflecting on the lessons and the students. Every student had mattered, every melody had been important, but the quiet student lingered in her mind. There was a depth to their journey that spoke to the purpose of teaching itself, the ability to nurture growth quietly, patiently, and without expectation. As the school emptied and silence settled fully in the piano room, the teacher finally allowed herself to imagine the next chapter. Retirement would bring rest and perhaps leisure, but also the challenge of leaving behind a life that had been filled with so much meaning. She felt a mixture of gratitude and melancholy, knowing that the room had given as much to her as she had given to it. The quiet student's presence in the room, though understated, had been a constant source of reflection. The teacher thought about the patience required, the understanding needed, and the small triumphs that had marked each lesson. These were the moments that defined teaching, moments that often went unnoticed but were deeply transformative for both teacher and student. Finally, the teacher stood and looked around the room one last time. The piano, the books, the sunlight on the keys, all seemed to hold memories. She knew that when she left this place, it would not be forgotten. She had shared not just music, but lessons of patience, resilience, and quiet courage. And in return, she had learned the profound impact of listening, of observing, and of believing in someone even when they could not yet believe in themselves. The day ended with a sense of completion. The piano room, once filled with chatter, notes, mistakes, and laughter, now held only echoes of time past. The teacher knew that these echoes carried the stories of every student, and especially of the quiet one who had taught her more than words could express. And somewhere in the world, that quiet student carried their own music, their own confidence, and the silent gift of a teacher's care that would never be forgotten. The piano room was quiet again, the echoes of the final lesson lingering softly in the air. The teacher stood by the window, letting the last light of day fall across the piano keys. The warmth of the sun felt gentle, but there was a subtle ache in her chest. All the students had left, each carrying pieces of the music and memories from the room, leaving behind only silence. As she approached the piano, her eyes fell on something unusual. Resting on the middle keys was a small object carefully placed. She paused, surprised, then moved closer. It was a folded note, tied with a tiny ribbon, and beside it, a small, handcrafted item that she did not recognize immediately. The teacher picked up the note gently, feeling the care in every crease and fold. She sat down on the bench, her hands trembling slightly, and opened it. The note was simple, written in careful handwriting. It spoke softly, expressing gratitude and appreciation for all the lessons, all the patience, all the quiet encouragement. The words were not elaborate, but they were full of meaning. It told the teacher that the lessons had made a difference, that the music had changed more than just notes on a page. It spoke of confidence, courage, and trust, things that could not be taught with words alone. The handcrafted item was even more touching. It was small, made from delicate material, and it reflected the quiet student's personality, subtle, thoughtful, and precise. It was not an expensive gift, but it did not need to be. The teacher understood that the value lay in the intention, the thought behind it, and the years of silent appreciation. Every detail showed care and reflection. The student had spent time, energy, and thought to create something unique, a personal symbol of gratitude. The teacher sat for a long time, holding the gift and reading the note again and again. Memories of years of lessons flashed before her eyes. She remembered the first day, when the student had entered the room silently, hands in pockets, unsure of every movement. She recalled each practice session, each small triumph, every moment where the student had tried again instead of giving up. These moments now felt alive in the simple gift that lay before her. Her mind wandered through the lessons they had shared. The student had struggled with confidence at first, hesitant to press the keys with certainty. The teacher had guided gently, demonstrating patience and care. Over time, the student had grown stronger, not only in music but also in character. It was a quiet transformation, invisible to most, but profound to anyone paying attention. The teacher thought about all the students who had come before, all the memories the room held. Yet this moment felt different. The gift, the note, the quiet acknowledgement, it was deeply personal. It reminded her why she had devoted her life to teaching. Not for applause or recognition, but for moments like this, where effort and care were understood without words, where growth and trust were expressed silently. She traced the edges of the handcrafted piece with her fingers, feeling the texture and the effort that had gone into it. Each small detail told a story. It was a token of understanding, of connection, of a bond formed over years of music and patience. The teacher's eyes filled with tears, not from sadness, but from the warmth of being recognized and appreciated in a way that went beyond words. The note and the gift carried more than gratitude. They carried acknowledgement of the quiet hours spent practicing, the small victories that had gone unnoticed, the courage it had taken to continue despite doubts. The teacher realized that the quiet student had learned far more than music in this room. They had learned persistence, attention, and care. And she had learned, too, from their silent determination. She placed the gift carefully on the piano, looking at it as if it were a treasure chest of memories. She felt the presence of the student, even though they were gone. It was as if the room had held their spirit, the echo of each note, each careful movement of the hands over the keys. The teacher understood that this small gift had captured years of shared experience, and it would remain with her forever. The day passed slowly. She moved through the room, touching the piano keys lightly, remembering lessons, small conversations, and the quiet moments that had never been acknowledged. The gift on the keys reminded her that teaching was more than instruction. It was shaping lives, nurturing growth, and witnessing transformation. The quiet student had given her something far more valuable than words could express: the understanding that her dedication mattered. As the sun began to set, the room took on a golden glow. The teacher lingered by the piano, gazing at the gift, thinking about the journey that had led to this moment. Years of patience, guidance, and silent observation had culminated in this simple act of acknowledgement. The quiet student had left behind more than a note and a small handcrafted item. They had left a part of their journey, a reflection of trust and connection that could never be replicated. Finally, the teacher rose, placing the gift safely on the shelf where it could be seen, but not disturbed. She took a deep breath, letting the emotion settle gently in her chest. She realized that retirement no longer felt quite so heavy. The music room had given her years of purpose, and this small, thoughtful gift was a reminder that her work had made a real difference. Some connections do not require words. Some gratitude is silent, yet deeply felt. The room was quiet once more, but the echoes of years of lessons remained. The piano keys seemed to hum softly, carrying the memory of each note, each student, and especially the quiet student whose presence had left a lasting mark. The teacher stepped back, letting the light fall on the gift, knowing that it represented not only the student's appreciation but the fulfillment of a career spent nurturing, guiding, and understanding. She closed the door gently, leaving the gift on the piano keys. The room would hold the memory of the quiet student forever, a small reminder that the most meaningful moments are often quiet, simple, and deeply human. The piano room was silent in a way it had never been before. The quiet of the building seemed to stretch through the walls, wrapping around the shelves of music books and the worn wooden floors. The teacher stood by the piano, hands resting lightly on the keys, still feeling the warmth of the small gift left by the quiet student. It had been there for hours now, a gentle reminder of the connection that had been forged through years of music and patience. Retirement officially began the next day, but tonight she lingered, unwilling to leave too soon. The room had been her companion for decades. It had seen children fumble over simple melodies, celebrate small victories, and grow into their own confidence. It had heard laughter, questions, sighs, and even frustration. And now it was quiet, holding memories like invisible threads woven through the air. The teacher sat on the bench for a while, her fingers tracing the keys, feeling the smoothness and the tiny imperfections that came with years of use. She remembered students from long ago, some she had not seen in decades. Their voices, their excitement, their quiet determination. They all lingered in the corners of the room. Yet it was the quiet student who weighed heaviest in her heart, the one who had taught her patience and understanding in ways that no words could describe. She reflected on the journey of that student. The timid eyes, the small hands that had once trembled over every note, the patient persistence through mistakes and pauses. The teacher had guided, corrected, encouraged, and celebrated silently. But it was the student who had given the greatest gift: dedication without expectation, effort without applause, and trust without question. That trust had culminated in the gift on the piano keys, a simple yet profound acknowledgement of everything they had shared. Looking around the room, she noticed small things she had never really appreciated before. The faded sheet music, the pencil marks on some of the books, the slight unevenness of the keys from years of use. Each detail held a story, a lesson, a memory of a student learning, struggling, and growing. It was more than a room or a piano. It was a vessel for countless moments of transformation, moments that had quietly shaped both the students and herself. The teacher thought about the meaning of teaching, of dedicating one's life to nurturing others. She realized that it was never about recognition or fame. It was about moments like this, where years of guidance and patience culminated in quiet acknowledgement. The gift had been more than a note or a small object. It had been a conversation without words, a story of growth, and a silent expression of gratitude. It had reminded her why she had devoted so much of herself to her students. As night fell, the sunlight faded and the room was bathed in the soft glow of the lamps. Shadows stretched across the piano, highlighting the keys that had been pressed by so many hands over the years. She ran her fingers lightly over them, remembering the quiet student's journey, the steady determination, the subtle triumphs. Each note that had been played was a testament to the power of perseverance and trust. The teacher took a deep breath and looked at the gift again. She smiled softly, realizing that it symbolized something larger than itself. It was the culmination of years of effort, patience, and understanding. It was a reminder that the most meaningful connections are often the quietest, and that the impact of teaching goes far beyond the music. It reaches into confidence, character, and the human spirit. She rose from the bench and walked slowly around the room, taking in every detail one last time. The shelves of books, the framed pictures, the worn floorboards, they all carried the memory of lessons past. She knew that leaving would be bittersweet, but the gift on the piano keys had given her a sense of completion, a final acknowledgement that her work had mattered. Outside the window, the world moved on, unaware of the significance of the small piano room. Children ran and laughed in the playground, cars passed along the street, and the evening breeze carried a faint scent of the city. Yet inside, time felt suspended, filled only with memory and reflection. The teacher realized that this was how the room would always be in her heart, a place where effort, care, and patience had been recognized, even in silence. She sat down one last time, letting her hands rest on the keys. Memories of every lesson, every student, and every quiet moment filled her mind. She imagined the quiet student's face, their careful movements over the keys, their small nods of understanding, and the silent acknowledgement that had finally been expressed. It was more than enough. It was a gift that would stay with her forever. The teacher finally stood, placing the gift gently in a safe spot on the piano. She turned to look at the room once more, committing every detail to memory. She knew she would leave soon, and the piano room would remain empty, but the lessons, the music, and the quiet connections would continue to live in her heart and in the lives of the students she had guided. She closed the door carefully, feeling the weight of the years and the lightness of completion at the same time. Walking down the empty hall, she carried with her the quiet strength of the student, the gratitude expressed in a small, meaningful gift, and the understanding that teaching is never about recognition, but about shaping lives quietly and profoundly. And in that understanding, she felt peace, knowing that her journey had been full, meaningful, and deeply human.